Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Julia. I was an admission officer at Haverford College, an outside reader for Emory University, and I currently work at Milton Academy, an independent boarding and day school outside of Boston, Massachusetts.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy has a bachelor's degree from the University of Georgia and a master's degree from North Carolina State University. She works in private practice in Raleigh as a mental health therapist. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at ScholarMatch for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Friends, it's a very exciting time in my life. Just had an incredible time with my mom and my sister from Southern Ontario and my daughters from Durham, North Carolina for 4 days. My sister got back to Southern Ontario and sent an email and said it was a trip of a lifetime. And, you know, we go to resorts together all over the country. So you're like, what did you do? Somebody said to me, where did you go? We just went to the Civil Rights Museum in Atlanta and went and saw a play called Sister Act and did some great restaurants and grilling and hot tub in the fire pit. But we had weather in the 70s. And so the lesson is you don't have to leave the area to have a great time with family. And while Joy and Karis were here, Joy got the call she was waiting on. So she's been interviewing for positions at both Duke and Chapel Hill as a wellness coach. And she was a finalist for Duke, but they're moving a lot slower because they want to start in July. But the more she researched the Chapel Hill job, the more she liked it. And it was going to be better pay. And we were in the car coming back from the Civil Rights Museum, and Joy got the call. She was offered the wellness coach job at UNC Chapel Hill to work with undergraduate students as a wellness coach. So she accepted right away. And so she said, I guess I know where my allegiances are in the UNC Duke rivalry. But at some point, I'm going to actually have her come on the podcast to talk about wellness coaching, because it's actually a tremendous service that a lot of colleges offer students, and students don't even know anything about it. And your student should take advantage of wellness coaching if it's something that his or her college offers. So I'll let her get a little bit of time under her belt over there as a wellness coach. I mean, she works for me part-time as a wellness coach, but and she did it also at Duke. But at some point, I'll have her come on and talk to you guys about wellness coaching and who it's good for and how your student can get involved when they get to college in wellness coaching. All right, friends, I'm calling an audible today from what I had originally planned. I'm going to be a little shorter than I normally am. And if you listen to this podcast at all, you know I love a good quote. I mean, I end every podcast with a quote. So I was out this morning and I'm gardening. I'm like pruning these crepe myrtles and pruning these roses. I'm listening to an interview. And I heard a quote that was so powerful, it just left me speechless. So I'm going to share that with you because I can't stop thinking about it. Then we'll have the final part of what I thought was a fun interview for me and hopefully helpful for you, Andy Stickler, breaking down Connecticut College. And remember, friends, we're only 2.5 weeks from your chance to have 60 minutes with Andy to ask him your questions. You won't find a more transparent and straightforward admission officer in the country. And I'm happy to say more than 40 of you have already signed up for that. So you just sign up by going to yourcollegeboundkid.com, clicking the events page, and you can't miss the sign up there. You'll see Andy Stickler Thursday, April 3rd at 8:30. A couple people reach out to me this week and say, I'm glad you moved it from 9:30 to 8:30. I can't do that 9:30 stuff. We're just trying to be sensitive to West Coast folks when we did the 9:30, but hopefully 5:30 will still work for you on the West Coast. Speaking of events, we're 5 days away from our first meet and greet. We're 4 of our co-hosts all attending the SACAC conference in Raleigh for some professional development, and we are coming to meet you. So I spoke with my oldest daughter, Karis, last night. She's making hors d'oeuvres and desserts, and we'll mingle, play some podcast trivia, have some small prizes, just have some fun. So if you're close to Raleigh or in the area, We'd love to have you join us 7 p.m. Saturday, March 3rd at Kelby Farms Apartment in the clubhouse in Durham. And the address and everything is listed on our website under yourcollegeboundkid.com/events. We have room for 7 more people, and then we're at the capacity of the fire hazard folks. So we got to honor that. But we'd love for you to be one of those last 7 spots. So come on out, and we'd love to meet you. It's really fun meeting podcast listeners. Speaking of events, I attended a training session for ScholarMatch on the 14th of March. I thought it was fantastic, very well done. And if you want to help an under-resourced student with the college process, ScholarMatch wants you, and they will provide the training. All you need to do is bring the heart and dedication, and you can work with 1 or 2 kids. It's not only a great way for you to help a student, but it may be a chance for you to see if being a college counselor is in your future. So they have one final info session Tuesday, March 26th at 10 Pacific, or 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central, 11 a.m. Mountain Time. And these are 1-hour sessions, and that includes Q&A. So you can just go to scholarmatch.org, look for the virtual counselor info. We'll also have information in our show notes, on this last session as well. And you could also hear the full 65-minute interview with 2 ScholarMatch coaches by going to yourcollegeboundkid.com and going to the interviews tab. All right, so let's dive right in with this quote. So, like I said, I'm out gardening this morning, and I'm just working away. And I was supposed to really do this on February 14th, but I procrastinated like 5 weeks. So I'm out there doing my pruning, and all of a sudden, smack, this quote hit me like a brick in the face. So if you're a regular listener to the podcast, a few weeks ago, I referred to Jenson Huang, the founder of Nvidia, which has now become the 3rd wealthiest public company in the country, passing Google and Amazon, and I believe on the way to number 1. And I've been fascinated by Jenson Huang for some time, like for a few reasons, partly because it's the biggest stock I own, and I'm it's a hobby of mine, into stock investing. But I'm also fascinated by AI, and I'm also fascinated by people. And this guy's absolutely brilliant. I find him captivating. So I like to listen to a lot of his interviews. He's got tons of them up on YouTube. And this particular interview was only 11 days or so ago. I mentioned him about a month ago because, his story, he came over from Vietnam at age 10 without his parents, was in Kentucky. And then he ends up going to Oregon. He skips 2 years of high school, and he goes and studies engineering at Oregon State. And I mentioned, think if he would have been an admit rate snob and say, I can't look at schools that have an 80% admit rate or not. Who knows? He may not be where he is today, but he didn't do that. He went to school with an 83% admit rate. And now he's the founder and CEO of the 3rd wealthiest company in the country. So he goes on to, in this particular lecture I'm listening to, he's giving a keynote, and he's giving it to the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research. So he's speaking to a group of Stanford students, and this is about 10 days ago. And the guy who's interviewing him, and I'm only kind of half-heartedly listening because I'm really getting into my pruning, and I've got all my stuff out. I really get into this stuff. Like my mom and my sister is like, who is this guy? Never thought in a million years I would be gardening. But, you do change over time. So I'm out there with all my tools. I'm listening away. And then all of a sudden, the guy interviewing Jenson Huang says, what advice would you give to them? And he's meaning the Stanford students who are in the audience, to improve their chances of success. So the question is, what advice would you give to them to improve their chances of success? Now, listen very carefully to what Jenson says. And how do I know this? I literally went back watching YouTube, stopping and starting so I could write down every word verbatim. He says, most of the Stanford graduates have very high expectations. You deserve to have high expectations because you come from a great school. You were successful. You were at the top of your class. You are graduating from one of the finest institutions on the planet. You are surrounded by other kids that are just incredible. you naturally have very high expectations. Now, keep in mind, Jenson Huang does have a master's MBA from Stanford. So far you're thinking, big deal. What's so profound about this? Now listen to what Jenson says. People with high expectations have very low resilience. And unfortunately, resilience matters in success. He says, I don't know how to teach it to you, except for, this is what he says, I hope suffering happens to you. I was like, oh my goodness, when I'm listening. Did I hear what I thought I heard? He goes on to say, I was fortunate that I grew up with my parents providing a condition for us to be successful. There were plenty of opportunities for setbacks and suffering. And to this day, I use the phrase pain and suffering inside our company, referring to Nvidia, with great glee. And I mean that. This is going to cause a lot of pain and suffering. And I mean that in a happy way, because you want to train and refine the character of your company. You want greatness out of them. And greatness is not intelligence, as you know. Greatness comes from character. And character isn't formed out of smart people. It is formed out of people who have suffered. If I could wish upon you, and I don't know how to do it, but for all of you Stanford students, I wish upon you ample doses of pain and suffering. Wow. I watched it on YouTube, and he was serious as a heart attack. He didn't crack a smile, and he's a funny guy. I listen to him a lot. So, you may be driving and half listening, and I'm actually going to read part of that again because I want you to miss that. It's really profound. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but here's what he said, the last part. People with high expectations have very low resilience. And unfortunately, resilience matters in success. I don't know how to teach it to you, except I hope suffering happens to you. I was fortunate that I grew up with my parents providing a condition for us to this day. I use the phrase pain and suffering inside our company with great glee, and I mean that. This is going to cause a lot of pain and suffering, and I mean that in a happy way, because you want to train and refine the character of your company. You want greatness out of them, and greatness is not intelligence, as you know. Greatness comes from character, and character isn't formed out of smart people. It is formed out of people who have suffered. Friends, when I interviewed Susan in 2019, in a fantastic interview, if you haven't heard it, you need to go back and listen. She wasn't a co-host at that time. She was just a friend who I'd worked with for going back to 2002, since our days at Westtown together. And the topic was the personal statement, how to bring yourself to life. And at the very end, just like anybody else, I put her on the hot seat. And I asked her to share a book that she's read that had impacted her life. So Susan said the book, The Blessings of a Skinned Knee by Dr. Wendy Mogul. Now, one of the chapters in Dr. Wendy Mogul's book is called The Blessings of a Skinned Knee. Now, the subtitle of the book is called Raising Self-Reliant Children. And my favorite chapter in this book is the title, the one that's named after the title, The Blessings of a Skinned Knee. And it goes on to say why God doesn't want you to overprotect your child. Friends, I look back at some of the biggest challenges I've had in my life. I think in high school, I had a lot of challenges in high school. I was in like 9th grade when the movie Roots came out, and I incurred all kinds of racial slurs. I remember the kunte kinte and all this stuff. And I was like literally one of the only black kids in the whole school. And then I also was trying hard. I know it sounds bad, but I was trying hard to make the Olympics. I really was. I was triple jumping 42 feet as a 15-year-old. And the guy that had won the gold medal in the Olympics, Willie Banks, he triple jumped 42 feet as a 15-year-old. So I'm like, well, if he was doing 42 feet at 15 and he could go to the Olympics and get a gold, then why can't I go? But I trained really, really hard all year round for 4 years, track club, indoor, outdoor. The problem was at 18, I was doing 44 feet. And at 18, he was doing 51 feet. So I only improved 2 feet. Some of it was injuries. Some of it was I probably peaked early. And I ended up not even getting a full scholarship for track. I was the best triple jumper at Michigan State, but I was just a walk-on. I didn't even get a scholarship. Like, that wasn't even in my mind that I wouldn't get a scholarship. I was thinking about going to the Olympics and getting a gold. So that was tough. And then when I was in grad school, I really struggled with chronic fatigue syndrome. I remembered for about a year and a half, saw a million doctors. I remember seeing Dave's dad, who was a doctor. I couldn't even walk a block at times. I'd be so fatigued. I had to get a ride in a car to go a block. So that was a tough time in my life. And I remember pretty soon after finishing grad school, I had a job with an impossible boss that was like the boss from hell. That was tough. And then from 2012 to 2014, now I'm doing college counseling. I've started my company. And I'm like, I always had a heart for access. And I'm like, instead of people paying thousands of dollars to work with me, what if I developed a 10-hour college admissions series and they could pay a fraction of that price? And I could help more people that maybe can't afford to have a private college coach. So I developed this Game Changer College Admissions video series. It took me literally 20 months because when you're doing video, oh my goodness, so much editing. And the series cost me over $100,000 out of my own money. And I went on the travel circuit and I started traveling around and talking about it. And people would be like, well, video's nice, but I want to talk to you. I was like, oh, snap. And then I underestimated how many things would change. The SAT dropped from a 2400 scale to a 1600 scale. FAFSA ID got rid of the PIN. CA4, Common App 4 was a disaster. And all these things kept changing, and I kept having to pay more and more and more and more to do video editing. And then I did something that was completely asinine, total bonehead move. Don't ever do it. I tapped into some retirement to pay for all the expenses. When all was said and done, my total sales were $35,000 and I spent over $100,000. So I lost $65,000. So that was tough. Those are just examples of things that were some of the challenges I've had in my life. But every single one of those made me stronger. What doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. And I used to be a preacher in the 80s and 90s. So this episode may be a bit sermonic, but we all want our kids to be successful, right? So remember, what did the host say when he was interviewing Jenson Huang? What advice would you give them, meaning Stanford students, to improve their chances of success? And what did Jenson say? If I could wish upon you, I don't know how to do it, but for all of you Stanford students, I wish upon you ample doses of pain and suffering. Just remember, friends, your biggest bruises often become your biggest blessings. All right, enough of that spiritual talk. Let's transition to my interview with Andy Stickler on Connecticut College.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Friends, we're up to the final part of my interview with Andy Stickler, and this one is a shorter interview, and then Andy goes on the hot seat. But Andy starts out going into more detail about how they use scores. Then Andy talks about their academic reader rating in more detail, and he talks about how they use historical data and factor that into their admissions decisions. I think you're going to find it fascinating. And then when Andy goes on the hot seat, he does not bore you. Friends, when you start out listening to the interview with Andy, you might think, hey, snap, I've already heard that before. Sometimes I do this where I go back and I play a couple minutes or 30 seconds from the previous week for a couple reasons. It can help you to get the context for the flow, or if somebody hasn't heard it, they can follow, the conversation that's going to ensue for the next 5 minutes. So this is one time where I did that. So don't think you've already heard it before. Just know I'm going to play the first 2 minutes of last interview so you have some context. Listen and enjoy. Sure, but when you plug it into your system and you look at the math, some people are looking at landscape. They're looking at the College Board landscape product, right? And they're looking at the school context that you come from.
Absolutely.
Some people are saying both your parents are doctors. You're very educated. You know, that's a factor here because we know the correlation between income and education and test scores.
Yep.
And then some people are kind of just looking at their numbers, you know, and so how do you handle that with your system where you plug it in?
I'm looking at it purely internally in terms of this is the data point I get from your grades. This is the data point I get from your curriculum. This is the data point I get from your test scores. If these two data points are better than this data point, go test optional. If this data point, the test score is higher than the other two data points, submit your test scores. So for me, it's purely a quantifiable analysis based on internal rubrics.
All right. So you're not looking at it through the prism of the demographics of the family.
Nope.
You're just looking at it you're looking at
correct.
Do your test scores enhance your profile or do they detract from it?
Yeah, I don't want to get into a subjective assessment about expectation. What would I expect from a student from background X, Y, or Z? I'm looking at it purely from a quantifiable internal perspective regarding our rubric. Does the test score help or does the test score hurt? That's how I'm doing it.
It's just a lot of different ways to do this because there's some who would look at it through the prism of class and advantage, and they wouldn't say it's about me getting into an expectation. It's me taking the privileges that you've been afforded into context, so it's part of a contextual read, right? Like there's, you know, and do you feel, it sounds like you just feel like that's maybe just too hard to do, or I don't know, I'm just trying to hear why you wouldn't look at that and factor that in.
That's a good question. You know, and after 9 years of reading, you know, thousands of applications a year, you know, our internal assessment tool on the academic side, which is formulaic, which allows us to normalize the myriad of different academic profiles and different academic backgrounds we get. That's the perspective that I have brought to the conversation about whether you should submit or whether you should waive your test score.
And
it's just based on our internal rubric, I guess.
Sure.
I appreciate your thought because that's an interesting and different way to think about it.
Yeah, and it's a way that I hear quite a few admission officers approaching it too. It's not like some out of the blue, you know, Mark Stuckler view. How did you come up with this system? Because that's not, you know, the internal rubric where you know that, okay, your test scores are better than your GPA. Like, was that something you worked with some data quants and some outside groups to come up with, or how did you come up with that? Something that you brought, you know?
No, the key is consistency, which is, you know, we want to make sure that the data that we possess and the tool that we use to assess relative academic strength is consistent not only across the applicant pool, but consistent across years. So we've tested it via an outside vendor once or twice since I've been here. But it's just a consistent tool that basically ignores high school GPA because every high school calculates GPA differently. And we look at performance. We assess rigor within opportunity, okay, with some very, very deliberate descriptors in terms of what we're looking for. And then test scores. And you know, every time College Board recenters their scores, we need to sort of figure out some concordance to make sure that the data point value we're assigning to a particular score provides some level of consistency. And the last thing that we do is we make sure that we actually import current year GPAs. So current students' GPAs get re-inputted into Slate. And we track con GPAs versus academic profile. And I actually sit on the Committee on Academic Standing, which allows me to hear of all the first years and sophomores, juniors, and seniors that are experiencing academic challenges. And, you know, there's always a narrative that goes with that.
So you're not looking at GPA because GPAs are all over the place, but you're obviously factoring grades. Grades are included as part of the rubric. So are you recalculating a GPA so that it's normed?
We recalculate a GPA, but we only do for purposes of the common data set. And that we want to have a GPA that's in Slate, but we don't make academic assessments based on GPAs. We do it based on the academic reader rating that we use. which basically, I mean, it's a mirror of a GPA. It's a tool that allows us to assess academic performance, A's, A minuses, B pluses, B's, B minuses, etc.
Right.
Across a student's 4-year lifespan in high school across academic subjects.
Does your system take grade inflation into consideration? Can it factor in this school, 70% of kids have A minuses over here versus this, or does that not really get factored into your system?
Historical data, it does get factored in. So when we're looking at a school group, we have every applicant from that high school since 2012. And we can see historical admission decisions, students who've enrolled, what they looked like academically, and then we can track how they've done academically over the course of 4 years.
I wondered if you did that. So so some schools like build out a profile, kind of almost like Georgia Tech actually has this on their website. They call it Academic Snapshots. And you can go in for any high school in Georgia where there's 10 or more Georgia Tech students in the last few years, and it'll literally show this was their high school GPA. This was their GPA after 1 year at Tech, and they literally can test grade inflation.
Right.
When I found that thing one day, that was 3 hours there gone, man. I had to dig into the data.
I believe it. I believe it.
Yeah.
We do that. We just don't post it publicly.
Sure. But you are able to take historical performance. You can know how a CHOAT GPA translates to performance
at Con,
and then take that school context. I love it. To me, that's when I was in admissions, I built the system like this. We only did it for schools where we got a lot of kids because it wasn't accurate without it. But I found it to be really helpful, and I don't see a lot of people doing that.
Yeah, I mean, and again, last Thursday morning, I sat through the Committee on Academic Standing just to make sure and I sit through the review of all first-year students, so I can hear the first-year students that are struggling and why they're struggling, and it that allows me to check back on certain things, but it also allows me to check forward on certain students that we may have admitted in the past cycle who we considered a little bit at risk, and check forward and make sure that they're doing okay academically.
Andy, this has been awesome. Is there anything you haven't shared about College that you want to share?
No, just go Camels, man. That's it.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but no first-time guest gets away without going on our hot seat. We call it the lightning round. Okay, I'm going to ask you some quick non-admission questions.
Go ahead.
Down for it?
You bet.
All right. Andy can't be in education at all. What other line of work is kind of intriguing to you?
Part-time tennis pro.
Whoa. Tell me about that.
I want to feed balls to 8-year-olds and watch them whack them around a tennis court. That's what I'm going to do.
Is that also a hobby for you? Do you get out there and whack it yourself?
Oh, yeah, all the time. I'm a regular tennis player here in the Shoreline area.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Maybe the answer is tennis. But other than tennis, what sport are you the best at?
Golf.
Oh, what's your handicap? Under 20?
It's under 10.
Really? You're pretty good. You're pretty good.
Technically, my index right now, which is a little inaccurate because I BS'd it 2 years ago to get it down. Technically, my index is like 1.2.
Whoa, you've got game.
Sometimes.
There's not a lot of margin for error.
If any of my golfer friends hear this, they're going to be like, that's BS. No way he's a 1.2. Come on. I saw him triple bogeys all the way around the back nine.
Well, I love golf, and I used to play all the time. But one of my highlights of my golf experience is when I got an 89. So that's me.
There you go.
Well, breaking 90. Now, I am one of this, like, no gimmies, 6 inches. Yeah. You got to putt them.
Got to putt it out.
Counting all the out of bounds rules and going back. I play by the rules. But but it's a tough sport. There's a lot of mental toughness in that game, isn't it?
And 1 or 2 bad holes, and it's like, oh, great. Just ruined that round.
And it's amazing. Like, you miss a couple putts, and then you stand over a little short one, and if you're thinking, I'm going to miss, you're going to miss.
Yeah, you're going to miss it. Absolutely.
Yeah. What's the place on the bucket list you haven't been but you want to go to?
Golf-wise?
No, anywhere.
Oh, All right, so I'm going to call out one of my friends here. Do you know Jeff Allen, who's the dean of admission at Macalester?
I don't know Jeff, and I was at
You should know Jeff. Jeff is an awesome dude.
Okay.
And Jeff, this goes out to you because I hate you. Jeff is on currently like a sabbatical administrative leave from Macalester College from December 15th until April 15th. And the other day he texted me pictures from Melbourne, Australia, where he was for the Australian Open. And I am so jealous. Because January is not the time of year where I can escape for 2 weeks to go to Australia.
Sure.
So that's a bucket list. I got to get to the Aussie Open at some point.
What's your favorite major?
Oh, I've been to the U.S. Open now 3 times.
Yeah.
I love the U.S. Open in Flushing Meadow. It is just, it's amazing. And it's super easy for us to get there from New London. So the last 2 years I've gone on the first day, and it is unbelievable. So much fun.
What advice would 52-year-old Andy give to 17, 18-year-old Andy?
Don't be quite as shy as you were.
Oh,
and
you're shy back in the day?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I was afraid of my own shadow when I left high school.
What got you out of that?
Earlham College.
Really?
Yep. Go to a small
Quaker
place
school.
because it consistently asked me to come out of my shell. And now I give open house speeches in front of 1,000 people. And if you had told me that at age 17, I would have been like, you're crazy. But it all started at Earlham College, which was about 1,000 students, and just consistently every day asked me to step out of my comfort zone and asked me to step out of the shell. It was amazing.
Love it. What's a book that has impacted you that you'd recommend you think more people need to read?
Oh boy, what's a book that's impacted me? Oh, can I phone a friend on that one? Can I 50-50 that one?
You're going back a few years. It doesn't have to be college admissions.
Yeah. I do a lot of reading that's just mindless, so it's hard.
Mm-hmm. Nonfiction, fiction?
I think one of the ones that really hit me early in my career is the ones, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria?
Oh, yeah. Spellman's former president. That was a powerful book.
Yep.
It was so well articulated.
Yep.
How did it impact you? Explain something that you were always curious about?
Well, it helped illuminate the dynamics of my work on a college campus. Mm-hmm. I was born and raised in the Western, you worked at Westtown. I grew up in Radnor, Pennsylvania. I went to Radnor High School.
Oh, Radnor. You went to Radnor High School?
I went to Radnor.
Okay.
But I came from a really homogenous environment.
Sure. Main line of Philly?
Yeah. And in some respects, you're trapped by the prism of your own experience. And my experience is that of a privileged, both my parents went to college, upper middle class. College was an expectation. When I got to college, did I really realize what I was doing? And did I really realize the life experience that other people brought to their experience at Earlham College? And reading that book, and again, it's so long ago, opened my eyes about how folks from different backgrounds landed on a college campus and how they crafted their experience at those places over the course of, their 4-year enrollment experience. And this happened when I was recruiting the city of Chicago for Kalamazoo. And there was a period of time where 40 or 50% of the African-American students on our campus were kids that I had worked with directly out of the city of Chicago to come to Kalamazoo. And it helped me realize what I didn't know about their life experiences and how they brought those to bear on their particular lived experience at Kalamazoo.
Yeah, just listening to you, I can hear in you the appreciation for diversity, all types of diversity, right? And how when you bring it together in a residential community, how you can stretch and grow and come out and see the world differently and understand different perspectives.
Yeah,
I can see
figure out what you don't realize that you know what you don't know, and how much wider the prism and the horizon of life experiences are beyond just your own.
I've never written a long review on Amazon, but on that one, I wrote like a 2-page review on Amazon reviews for that book. Yeah, I just started flowing. Last question for you, Andy. Okay. What's your advice to 3 groups of people? Students, parents, college counselors.
Students, have fun. Don't stress. Life will work out. I've been doing this long enough. It always does. Parents, just tell your loved one, tell your children over and over and over again that they are okay and you love them no matter what. They need to hear that from people like us over and over and over again. And college counselors, keep doing the good work. And we have a tough job here on the college side, but navigating those 2 constituencies as a college counselor is really challenging as you're trying to help bring students and families to a place where, success is a broader definition, where students aren't stressed and aren't feeling so much anxiety, where they can navigate putting themselves out there in the first time in their lives in a very real and risk-oriented way for admission/acceptance or denial/rejection. Help support them. Keep doing what you're doing. I have so much respect and so much admiration for so many college counselors. It's amazing.
Andy, this has really been a treat. My favorite interviews are ones like this, where we're talking to a thought leader who just is so genuine, so honest, not afraid to drop the cover a little bit and not just be PC all the time. Listeners benefit from it. And I really want to thank you for this, as well as earlier when we talked about file reading for highly selective schools. I really greatly appreciate it. And I'm going to circle back with you in a couple of years or so. We'll get Susan Tree on and we'll come back and do it again in another topic. So if you're down for it, I'm down for it. This was great.
Totally down for it, Mark. Anytime, okay?
Thank you, my friend.
You bet. Have a great day.
Awesome. Friends, a couple things. We are really close to you having an hour one-on-one to ask questions to Andy Stickler. If you don't have any questions, trust me, it'll be worth it for you to listen to the other questions that the other attendees will have. You just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com, click the events tab, and sign up. April 3rd, 8:30 Eastern Time, 5:30 Pacific, 6:30 Mountain, and 7:30 Central. And friends, I think you can see why I'm really excited that Andy's going to be joining our In the News team as one of our co-hosts. We're getting him in the rotation. He just packs a lot of things: wisdom, transparency, student-oriented approach. And between what Andy's doing and what our Colorado College team is doing, and also Susan's reading files and Julia's reading some files, I feel like we are back to being in touch with the admission office in a way that we haven't always been in the 7 years of this podcast. So I'm super excited about that. Look to see Andy back again shortly to discuss one of the hot topics that's going on in the world of college admissions. And by the way, I guess you have to have the initial CC to be on our team. So we have Colorado College and we have Connecticut College. I can't tell you how many times I've confused them and had to go back and edit it. So the CCs are a tongue twister for me. I guess it's a prerequisite for the job. On Thursday's episode, Julie and I will continue with some tips for listeners. Our question from a listener will answer the question, what do I do if my student applied ED and got in and now they're having regrets? Julia will continue her interview with her good friend Lydia Dagenet as they discuss Haverford College and Swarthmore College in part 2 of 2. And Lisa and I will finish our final part of our spotlight on Marquette University. And friends, I close you out with what Jenson Huang said 10 days ago when speaking to Stanford students. Greatness comes from character, and character isn't formed out of smart people. It is formed out of people who have suffered. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.